And welcome back. The Florida housing market continued to slow down given the fact that rates went from about 3% back in January 2022 to approximately 6% this January. So in today's video, I'm going to provide some updates regarding what's happening right now in the Florida housing market. And first, if you guys are new here, I post frequent housing market updates so you guys can make a more informed decision about where you should be buying or selling a home. So I invite you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first thing I want to share with you guys is the share of price reductions in the state of Florida. And of course, one thing I have to mention is that every housing market's different, every city is different, but in today's video, I'm going to provide some updates regarding what we're seeing right now in the Florida housing market as a whole, for the state as a whole. So for the state as a whole, the percentage of price reductions according to altosresearch.com is approximately 38%. It has been decreasing more or less ever since December last year, which is a similar trend we're seeing on a national level as well. The share of price reductions has been more or less decreasing ever since November and December last year. On top of that, for Florida, the share at 38%, this is more or less the lowest levels going back to approximately mid-July last year. Now, having said that, at 38%, compare this to the past several years, we're still at very high levels. So 38% right now compared to 12 months ago, back in February 2022, the share was only 17%. Now again, it's approximately 38%. 2 years ago, the share was approximately 19.9%. And back in 2020 at this time, the share was 32%. In 2019, February 2019, the share was approximately 38%. So the current levels we have right now for the share of price drops is more or less on par with what we saw back in 2019. But when looking at 2018's levels, the share of price drops was approximately 33%. So the share of price reductions is at least a 5-year high during this same time frame. I also have a lot to share regarding what the Florida Realtors had to say as well. They actually just announced this on the 21st of February regarding January's numbers here. So let's first talk about cash sales. This is the total number of closed home sales in which the buyer used all cash. In other words, they didn't use a loan. So no loans involved here. So for January 2023 compared to January 2022, we actually saw a 35.7% decrease in cash sales for the state of Florida. And by the way, I should have mentioned this, but the stats I'm sharing in today's video from the Florida Realtors is only for single family houses only. In regards to the number of cash sales in Florida at 4,673, this is actually the lowest number of cash sales going back to May of 2020. Florida Realtors also provided the share of cash sales as well. So in January, the share was approximately 32%. So approximately 3 of every 10 houses that sold in January came from a cash buyer, 31.6%. Also, as you can see in this chart right here, going back to 2019, the share of cash sales really hasn't fluctuated too much over the past couple of years, going from around 30% to approximately 35%. But of course, one thing that caught my attention is that the percentage of cash sales over the past couple of years is much higher compared to pre-COVID levels back in 2019, and of course for the first 3 months of 2020. Let's also talk about home prices in the state of Florida regarding the median sold price. Of course, this means that 50% of all home sales sold above that price and 50% sold below. So the median sold price this January was just under $390,000. This is actually only a 4% increase compared to January of 2022. So there's a few things I want to mention regarding this is that this 4% increase compared to 12 months ago, look at this decrease compared to June though. In June, that was the highs we saw last year in June was $420,000. Now it's more or less $390,000. So this means by my dumb math here, a decrease of 7% compared to June last year. This is actually not too bad though, because on a national level, we're seeing home price decreases in the range of 10 to 11%. Whereas in Florida, only a decrease of 7%. For comparison's sake, when comparing home sold prices in the state of California, home sold prices have decreased by 17% from the highs we saw last year, whereas in Florida, only a decrease of 7%. One more thing I do want to mention regarding home prices here in Florida, though, at $390,000 this January, this is actually the lowest levels going back to February of 2022. And obviously, when looking at this chart right here for January of 2023, the levels right now at more or less 400,000 or just under 400,000 is obviously much higher compared to the past several years, especially compared to pre-COVID levels, because in January of 2019, the median sold price was approximately $250,000. That means home sold prices have increased by about 56% over the past 4 years in Florida. Here's what we also know regarding the percentage of houses selling under the seller's asking price. Because on average this January, home sellers sold their houses for 5% below their original list price. So on average, houses sold for about 5% below asking, which is obviously much different compared to 2022. I would say the first half of 2022, where on average, houses were selling for the original list price on average. But for the past 6 consecutive months, home sellers are selling their houses for below asking. Now, despite this fairly sharp decrease in the percentage of the original list price received, going from 100% this July or last July to now only 95%, the current levels we have right now for this January, it's hard to see here, but it looks like it's more or less on par with January of 2019, but still below January of 2020. Now, here's a metric that's been absolutely skyrocketing over the past several months. Because days on the market, it's at 40 days right now, a giant increase of 185.7%. 1 year ago, days on the market was only 14 days. This means it's taking nearly 3 times longer to sell a house in the state of Florida compared to January of 2022. Now, this is something we should definitely be following in the months to come because, of course, rates have surged to approximately 6.9% at the time of this video, which is the 21st of February here. And when talking about home sold prices, home sales or closed home sales for January, this is really what our housing market was like in November and December when the home buyer got their offer accepted and when they locked in their rate. So I would imagine a lot of these metrics in today's video are probably going to get worse if rates stay elevated above 6.5%, for example. I mentioned that because this trajectory of days in the market has been increasing greatly ever since more or less August of last year. So the current levels right now at approximately 40 days is actually below levels in 2020 in January, and of course January of 2019, where days in the market was approximately 50 days. So I'd be very curious what to see this is going to look like in the coming months, given the fact that rates have surged over the past several weeks. I also want to share the latest trends regarding contracts being signed between buyers and sellers or pending home sales. So this is the number of listed properties that went under contract with a home buyer this last month. So January 2023 at 22,988, a decrease of 19.4% compared to a year ago. Now, having said that, at approximately 23,000 new pending home sales, this is actually the highest levels going back to August of 2022, when there was 25,000 new pending home sales. So when looking at the chart below here, it's entirely normal to see an increase of new pending home sales each January. We saw that in 2022, 2021, as well as 2020. Huge increases compared to December, which of course makes sense. A lot of people more or less put their home search on hold during the winter months in December, and especially around the holidays. Now, having said that, the levels for this January are still below 2020, but more or less on par with January of 2019. Again, I'm very interested to see what February is going to look like given the sharp rise in rates so far this month, going from 5.99% on February 2nd, now up to nearly up to 6.9% as of today, which of course is the 21st of February. So obviously pending home sales is an indication of home buying demand, but here is an indication of home seller activity. New listings decreased by 4.8% compared to January of 2022, just over 26,000 new listings in this January, which, by the way, this is the highest number of new listings going back to August last year, when there's approximately 32,468. And also when looking at this chart below right here, for the current levels right now for January, this is actually less than pre-COVID levels. Back in January 2019, as well as January of 2020, there was actually over 30,000 new listings, whereas this January, only an increase of 26,416. And like I mentioned in previous videos, this could mean that there are going to be fewer new listings compared to pre-COVID levels because a lot of people do not want to give up their historically low rates. And this is especially true for people who want to sell their house and buy a more expensive home with a rate that's probably double the rate they currently have. In regards to housing inventory in the Florida housing market, they saw a surge of 134.2% compared to 12 months ago. Approximately 65,000 houses for sale in the state of Florida, according to the Florida Realtors here. Now, having said that, look at this. January, again, approximately 65,000 houses for sale. Obviously, much higher compared to January of 2021, January 2022, but below levels, or actually far below levels in January 2020, as well as January of 2019. Back in January 2019, there was approximately 100,000 houses for sale. Now there's only 65,000. In January 2020, there was approximately 80,000 houses for sale. So even though there's far more houses for sale over the past couple of years right here, we're still well below pre-COVID levels. In regards to the month supply in Florida, the month supply this January is 2.8 months. That's a giant increase of 180.0% from last January. This last January, the month supply was only 1 month. Now it's 2.8 months. As you can see right here, very low levels this spring of 2022, as well as the spring of 2021. But we did see huge increases in the the spring months of 2022. But over the past several months, the month supply has been more or less flattening out. Additionally, when comparing the month supply right now at 2.8 months, this is still much lower than the levels we saw back in 2020, where the month supply was more or less around 3.3 months. And also back in January 2019, the month supply was over 4 months. Now it's 2.8 months. Here's also the number of closed home sales by price range this January in the Florida housing market. The biggest decrease of closed home sales was actually in the range of 150,000 to just under 200,000, a decrease of almost 51%. We did see huge decreases in the range of 200,000 to 250,000 as well, a decrease of 47%. But as you can see right here, every single price segment have recorded decreases in closed home sales by at least 20%. Here's another interesting trend as well, because here's the number of properties that were listed for sale by price range. The biggest increases was actually in the luxury housing market. For $1 million or more for new listings, an increase of 28% from 12 months ago. Also in the range of $600,000 to $1 million, an increase of 14%. And obviously in the more affordable range for home prices of less than $300,000, huge decreases of at least 20%. And of course, it's worth mentioning here again that the median sold price this January is around $390,000. So of course, it makes sense. We're seeing huge decreases in closed home sales for less than $100,000, for example. But still, it's interesting to see we're seeing a surge of new listings in the luxury market. I also want to give you guys an update regarding foreclosures and short sales in the Florida real estate market. Because look at this. Foreclosures and REOs. REOs are real estate owned properties. They're listed by real estate agents. And they're foreclosures though. Foreclosures, look at this. In January, there was only 95 closed home sales for foreclosures and REOs. For short sales, there was only 26 properties. This is insane because look at this. Traditional home sales, which would be defined as not a foreclosure, not an REO, and not a short sale. So it's a non-distress home sale. That was approximately 14,645 closed home sales, whereas foreclosures only 95, short sales only 26 for the month. Therefore, the number of closed home sales for foreclosures and short sales has been virtually non-existent in the state of Florida. And with that said, please comment below your biggest takeaways from today's video. Also, if you guys got any value in this video whatsoever, then please hit the like button. I really appreciate that. Of course, I appreciate you. Hope you guys have an awesome day. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.